Okay. Everybody here? Yeah. Still enjoy the coffee? Please welcome Bapak Ibu yang masih di luar, silahkan masuk. Kita akan segera mulai sesi kedua kita dengan Bapak Profesor Wilfredo Alangui. Ya, Alangui. 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 Oke, baik. Kita akan segera mulai sesi kedua kita dengan invited speaker Bapak Wilfredo Alangui dengan subtema How to do ethnomathematics studies with the paper title is Window as Metaphor, Framing the Ethnomathematical Research Process. Okay, before we start, I'll introduce you Prof. Wilfredo. As you can read in the program book, page 19, Professor Wilfredo Alangui started working in University of the Philippines, Baguio in 1989. Yeah, 1986. Yeah, I was 3 years old. Professor Wilfredo Alangui is a professor of mathematics in University of the Philippines, Baguio since 2018. He is now the regional coordinator in Asia for International Network of Ethnomathematics, as well as the vice president for Faculty of All University of the Philippines, Baguio Academic Employees Union. During 2013 to 2018, he wrote 13 publications on ethnomathematics and education. I will give you additional information about Prof. Alangui. Professor Alangui finished her PhD on mathematics education from the University of Auckland, New Zealand. Yeah. His phone number, and this is also his WhatsApp number, +63, the Philippines code, +63 9088 616 165. Okay, +63 9088 61 61 65. Yeah. And you also can send his email. This is his email address, WV Alangui. Yeah. In Indonesia we pronounce Alangui. In Philippines we pronounce Alangui. Yeah. WV Alangui @up.edu.ph. Okay. And then this is the last information that I think it's useful for us. His t-shirt size is L, large. Yeah. So if you if you want to give her a souvenir t-shirt or batik maybe, yeah, his size is L. Okay. Oke, Bapak Ibu, itu tadi kurikulum vitae singkat dari Pak Alangui. Kita panggilnya Prof. Alangui ya, Profesor Alangui dari University of the Philippines, Baguio. Ya, beliau akan menyampaikan materi tentang how to do ethnomathematics studies, bagaimana melakukan penelitian di bidang ethnomathematics dengan judul Window as Metaphor, Framing the Ethnomathematical Research Process. Okay, Prof. Alangui, your time is 60 minutes. Yeah, 45 minutes presentation and 15 minutes question and answer. Okay, this time is yours.
Terima kasih Titik. Selamat pagi. Good morning to everyone. So just like Dr. Marsigit, I will have to go to my laptop for the presentation. But I would like to thank the organizers and the P4TK as an indigenous person, as an activist, and as a mathematician. So just to tell you a bit more, so I said I belong to an indigenous group in the Philippines. There are around 110 groups in the Philippines that may be identified as indigenous peoples, and that's coming from our National Commission on Indigenous Peoples. We're around 15 million to 20 million out of 110 million total population of the Philippines. That's a lot. Now, these indigenous peoples are distributed in our groups of islands. So up north, where I come from, that's Luzon, 33% of IPs live in that area. Then we have our mid-region, the Visayas group of islands, 6%. And Mindanao has the most number of indigenous peoples. Okay. And we only have 170 plus languages compared to what you have here. That's nothing. And just recently, we found out that we actually have 7,641 islands. It used to be just 7,101 islands. And that depends on whether it's low tide or high tide. Okay? If it's low tide, it's 7,101. If it's high tide, it's only 7,100. But now, the recent count is 7,641 islands. I've been here for 2 days, 3 days now, and Haryo, Lucy, Wawan have been showing me around, telling me about the words. So I learned that kambing and sakit have the same meaning as our, in my language. No? Kambing is goat to us, sakit is illness to us. But then there are also words that we have, but we have different meanings. Like for example, bawang for you is onion, right? Bawang to us is garlic. Yeah. So that shows our connectivity, our connections, our similarities, also our differences. They also taught me how to say hi wadus. Hi wadus. And hi chantik. You know? They told me I can only say that to special people. I don't know what that means. Makan, by the way, here is to eat, right? Makan to us, in another language, my language, is food. So again, you see the similarity. So I was talking about the Luzon group of islands. I don't have the pointer. Do you see the pointer? There. So this would be the Luzon group of islands. So 33% of the indigenous peoples live in this area. The middle part is that's the Visayan group of islands. That's only 6%. And Mindanao, which is closest to Indonesia, that's where we have our 66% of indigenous peoples. And don't mind this, it's just an attempt to list all the indigenous peoples, the 110. But the most important word there is etc. Meaning, we've not been successful yet in listing down all our indigenous groups. Okay, so there's more to the 110. Okay, so I'm going to reinforce what Dr. Marsigit already told us about ethnomath. So just for those of you who are new to the field, I'm going to talk about a bit of history. So the word ethnomath was first used by Ubiratan de Ambrosio in 1984 during the 5th International Congress on Math Education in Adelaide, Australia. So this is the reason why he's known as the father of ethnomathematics, because it was the first time that he used the term. And when he used it, he wanted to look at the relationship between math, culture, and society. That's basically the general description that he used when he first used the term ethnomathematics. So right from the start, he was already looking at or problematizing, no, how math, culture, and society are interlinked. Ay. A bit of history, and that's him. For those of you who have not seen his photo yet, he's quite, he's a bit old now, and he no longer travels a lot. Okay, so that was 1984. That's been 35. Wait, did I miss? Yeah. So it's been 35 years since the Ambrosios lecture, and now we have grown. And look at what we're doing now. No? This is a testament to the growth of ethnomathematics as a field of inquiry. And it has brought us together from different countries and with different formations. So for example, since 1984, we already have, we have the International Study Group on Ethnomathematics, or ISGEM. It was formed in late 80s. And then in the International Conference on Math Education, we always have this topic study group, the role of ethnomathematics on math education. So I'm telling you this so that you can also prepare, because you're doing so much already. The world has to know about what you're doing. And ICME is one venue for you to tell us about the work that you're doing, the researches, and many things that you're doing in the field of ethnomath. And it happens every 4 years. The next one is going to be in Shanghai in 2020. Unfortunately, I think the deadline for submission of papers has already passed. It's possible that you can write to the organizers and maybe there's an opening. But hopefully after 2024, you prepare for 2024. And then, of course, we have the International Conference on Ethnomathematics, which has been, it's been going on since 1998. Again, it's every 4 years. The first one was held in Granada, Spain, and then in Ouro Preto, Brazil, Auckland, Baltimore, Mozambique. The last one was held in Medellin, Colombia. And 2022, this you have to prepare for. This is going to be in Papua New Guinea, which is just your neighbor. So all the things that you're doing now could be presented in 2022, no? So that we all get to know what you're doing, and maybe also build networks, get new insights on how to go about ethnomathematics. And maybe 2026, Indonesia? No? In the future, we'll have one ICEM. EMX is our short term for ethnomathematics. EMX. And then since 1984, we already have a Journal of Math and Culture where you can submit your researches. So this is a peer-reviewed journal that is managed by ISGEM. And then already there's a proliferation of websites about ethnomathematics. So even after this conference, just Google ethnomath and you might find, other than the resources of Dr. Marsigit, which is a lot, no, you can also find all the other resources in the internet. So we have a lot of websites. Oops. And then, just recently, colleagues from Latin America formed the International Network of Ethnomathematicians. Actually, it evolved from their network of Latin American ethnomathematics, but now they're calling it International Network of Ethnomathematicians. They have a Facebook. They also actually have a website, but it's so hard to get into the website because they're blocking some IP addresses. No, from the Philippines, from Indonesia. I couldn't get into it last night. So, but they have a Facebook page. It's the Red Internacional de Ethnomathematica, which basically means International Network of Ethnomath. And they actually have this in their Facebook page. And that's because groups, the way they do weaving has relations with how they deal with quantity or space or relations, no? So it's an expression of how they think mathematically. No, for D'Ambrosio, really his concern is how come that Western mathematics has become so pervasive? Okay, this Eurocentric conception, this Western conception of mathematics has spread all throughout the world, and how does it shape human and social behavior? Okay, so he calls this, somehow there's a hegemony of Western mathematics. And his concern is how to understand how hegemony contributes to social inequities. That's really his primary concern. Like, how come that these Western knowledges, not only mathematics, have become so dominant to the point of marginalizing other forms of knowledge? And therefore, when you're doing an ethnomath study, you can approach it from different perspectives. It can be historical, meaning you can study the encounter between cultures. When colonizers came here, they brought new systems of knowledge that could have had an effect on our own knowledge systems. What was the impact of that encounter? What got lost? What got marginalized, or what got enhanced in the encounter? So that could be a study that comes from the historical perspective. Philosophical, how do we justify the work that we do in mathematics? What philosophy informs our work? Political, how do we use mathematics to improve the lives of subjugated groups? Theoretical, what is the nature of a mathematical concept that is informed by ethnomathematics? Indigenous, which is what I prefer, which is the area that I work in, because I'm an indigenous person. How can mathematics or ethnomathematics improve the learning of indigenous students? And of course, pedagogical. In general, how can we have a culturally sustaining pedagogy or culturally rooted pedagogy that can improve the learning of mathematics of our students? So if you're going into an ethnomath study, you have all these possibilities. I'm sure maybe you would be more inclined to doing a pedagogical study because that's your immediate concern, right? How to improve your curriculum so that it becomes culturally sustaining, so that our students who go through this curriculum become proud of their identity as Indonesians or as indigenous Indonesians, and so that the curriculum does not. The curriculum gives them self-esteem and integrity after going through schooling, and they don't leave their identities behind when they move on to higher contexts of learning. Okay. Am I going too fast? Yeah, okay. Wait, we have some technical interventions here. Okay, just click it again, I think. Okay. Yeah. So I promised to talk about Barton's window metaphor and why I think this is still a relevant way of thinking about going about a study in ethnomathematics. So Barton clarifies that ethnomathematics is not mathematics. Okay? There's no sense, or it's difficult for us to talk about the ethnomathematics of a particular group. Because as I said earlier, when they're doing a practice, they're not consciously doing mathematics. It could be a Western category to them. So ethnomathematics is used to understand mathematics. It's about mathematics. And you can think of this as a window from which to view the way cultures think mathematically. Okay? So it frames the way you study a culture or a cultural practice. So there's a bill there. Oops, sorry. What happened? Did I turn it off? Where is the pointer? That's the pointer. Okay. Yeah, thanks. So there's Bill Barton and Pip Barton, his wife, and that's Dr. Ivan Riley, who was, both of them were my supervisors in Auckland University. And this photo was taken in 2016 at the last International Congress in Math Education in Hamburg. Okay. He has retired now. Bill Barton, before he retired, was the president of the International Commission on Math Instruction. So which is a very important position because they're basically laying down policies about math instruction in the entire, worldwide. Okay. So in his metaphor, Bill asks us three questions. No? When you look at a window, when you look at a culture, what are you looking at? What is being viewed through that window? What is the nature of the window? What frames? No? What is the nature of the... how do you frame what you're looking at? And who are the ones viewing the process? And why are they looking through that window? Which are, I think, very philosophical questions, important questions that we need to ask whenever we look at a practice. When you're looking at an artifact, why did you choose that artifact? What is your, how do you define the interest that you have about that artifact? What are you trying to find out? So the perspectives that I mentioned earlier, the historical, philosophical, theoretical, pedagogical, and so on, can be viewed as motivations that will help you frame your research. No, it gives you a vantage point. The window gives you a vantage point, or the motivations can be thought of as a vantage point that can help you define what you're looking at. So depending on your motivation, you can position yourself in the window, okay? Because you know what you want, you know what you're looking for. So for example, from a vantage point that is motivated by a historical perspective, you might be interested in looking at the dynamics of the encounter between Western and non-Western mathematical knowledge systems. And a good reference for this is the work of Joseph in 1991. Okay, so you look at the encounter. What happened during colonization? What happened when they brought in all these new knowledge systems to our communities? What got lost? What got marginalized? What did we lose? Okay, and we need to understand how this new knowledge system became dominant over our knowledge systems. So that's from a historical perspective. Oops. One example, my favorite one. This comes from New Zealand. before the colonizers came, the British came to New Zealand. Of course, the Maori people, the indigenous peoples of New Zealand, have their own ways of thinking. You know? They have their own language, and their term for example, three. Okay, like this one here, 3 cows. In the usual Western way of describing this, it's adjectival. No, there are things here which happen to be 3 cows, right? But in New Zealand, in their language, which got lost, they think of these cows as in the act of threeing. Something is happening between these 3 cows, even if they're just standing there. The word that they use to describe is more dynamic, to describe the number. Their conception of number is more dynamic. They are in the act of threeing. We are in the act of, depends on how many we are. Okay? Which is quite different from just saying 3 cows. Very static, right? So the question is, so in the encounter, this conception of number got lost. This this conception of Maori number got lost in the encounter. So the question is, what could have happened if this kind of conception of number was allowed to grow, was allowed to develop? What kind of mathematics could have developed if that's our way of thinking about mathematics? So that's a historical perspective. So you might want to look at what are the ways of thinking mathematically that got lost somehow in the process of development or in the process of colonization. So you might need to do some historical, research, uncovering of what was there in the past. And why did you lose it? Because there are a lot of concepts that might be useful to use until now. So, from a vantage point, motivated by an indigenous perspective like the one that I'm doing, you might want to look at specific cultural practice and look at how ideas embedded in the practice might relate to conventional mathematics. So, for example, in the study that I did, I looked at the rice terracing practice of an indigenous group in the Philippines, in my region, among the i-Besao people. And because of the steep terrain, we build rice terraces along the mountains, okay? And to hold these mountains, we build stone walls to hold those paddies, those rice paddies. So I looked at how water is managed in this intricate system or network of rice paddies, and how stone walls are built, depending on the height, depending on the slope. So what are the mathematical ideas that are embedded in this practice of stone walling and water management in a rice terracing practice in an indigenous community? Okay? And tried to look at ways of thinking that may be different, because that's what's interesting. We don't want to look at Western concepts that are already embedded, because we are looking from the perspective as mathematicians, right? So that's what we're looking for. But then a more interesting project would be, is there a concept from this practice that is different from Western math? Different from the usual conceptions that we have. So look at their language, look at how they talk about the practice. For example, in this stonewalling practice, the stonewallers would say, there are rightful stones. And therefore, there are stones that are not rightful. Okay? The stones need to bite into each other. They need to bite into each other. Okay? What does that tell you about their thinking? The stone wall should not resemble the shape of a pregnant woman, which is a metaphor, because if your stone wall is bulging like mine, that means that your stone wall is weak. right? So you need to have some aesthetics and be sturdy at the same time. So look at how they talk about the practice, because this might give you some ideas or concepts that are different from the usual Western concepts that we already know. That's the interesting part. But of course, we can easily describe the shape, the area, the height, right? And that's the usual stuff. And that's something also that you can use for students to learn or love mathematics, because this is something that they are familiar with in the community. And it's something that the elders teach them. No? They teach the guys the males how to build sturdy stone walls. From a vantage point motivated by pedagogical perspective, so you might be interested in developing a culturally responsive or sustaining mathematics curriculum. So I'm sure this is our interest at the moment, because we want to make our curriculum relevant to the students, because they are familiar with the culture. So we want to infuse our curriculum with cultural aspects that are familiar to them, so that they can access mathematics or conventional mathematics. So the good news is that there are studies that making our curriculum culturally relevant works. So for example, the work of Jerry Lipka and Barbara Adams among the Yupik Eskimo in Alaska. So they work in the community with the elders, and they develop modules. For example, building a fish rack. And it turns out that this module not only helped the Yupik students, but also the non-Yupik students perform better in mathematics. So there is basis for us to develop culturally relevant mathematics curriculum. And you can also study the impact of the modules that you are developing. That's research, right? So you develop a module, you use it in different settings maybe. You have a control and see the impact of the modules that you develop. If it doesn't, if it needs improving, then you go through the process again. You know, you're building a culturally sustaining curriculum. What is the impact on the students? They're not only learning mathematics, they're also becoming proud of their identity. No? Especially if these are indigenous students. So they come out of the classroom feeling proud, not ashamed of being indigenous, and more knowledgeable about mathematics. So those are some of the things that you might want to do. And this is a model that I adopted from Shehanaz Adam, a Maldivian colleague who also did her PhD in Auckland, same time that I was there, but she finished earlier. So in this model, you start from the world of the students. What are the activities in the culture that are familiar to the students? And is there something mathematical, no, in that practice? And if there is, how does it reflect their way of thinking mathematically? What about activities from other cultures? Because our students are not, enclosed in one culture, but they interact with other cultures. So what is that interaction? And in the end, how do we help them access conventional mathematics? By starting from the culture, looking at other cultures, looking at how they think mathematically, and then linking it to learning conventional math. So to summarize this section, our research motivations or perspectives, again, whether it's historical, pedagogical, indigenous, the questions that we ask are interrelated. You cannot really put them in boxes. Okay, I'm just doing historical. I'm not doing indigenous. I'm not doing theoretical. I'm not doing pedagogical. Most often than not, more often than not, these are interrelated, and you might have to do it interdisciplinarily. You need to. If you're not confident about a historical study, you might need to work with a historian, or you might need to work with an anthropologist. That makes our field interesting, because you get to work with different colleagues in different departments, or with different expertise. Okay? So you might want to look at the history of mathematics in Indonesia, the nature of mathematical knowledge, okay, and so on and so forth. Alternative conceptions, that's interesting. No? What new ideas can be found in the culture or in the practice? Then, of course, the role of culture in teaching and learning of math, which is pedagogical. Now, I think, again, probably because this is informed by my identity, I think that ethnomathematics and the work that we do here is essentially political. Why do I say that? Because I'm looking at valuing, recognizing, uncovering knowledge systems of non-Western societies, especially those that have been marginalized during the encounter, those that don't get the proper recognition, those that have been subjugated by Western knowledge. So don't be afraid of the word political. It's basically just the interaction between knowledge systems where one is more powerful than the other. So the objective is, how do you empower the other knowledge system so that we look at them on equal footing, no? That this knowledge system, which is non-Western, is also valuable and important. And a lot of these knowledge systems have survived for many years, persist up to this day. That means they are working. But sometimes science and math, Western knowledge systems, have a tendency to look at this as inferior to them, to science and Western knowledge. So that's why I say it's essentially political. And one work by an ethnomathematician, Jelsa Nichnik from Brazil, does that precisely. No, she has what she calls an ethnomathematical approach, where she looks at the traditions of subordinated or subjugated social groups, and how they understand the work that they do to interpret and decode their knowledge, so that they use this to acquire or have access to academic mathematics, and then also to establish a comparison between academic math and their kind of knowledge. So when you're doing ethnomathematics, you're not always doing indigenous groups. You might also want to look at special or particular cultural groups. For example, carpenters. Okay, a group of carpenters, you might want to look at how they think mathematically, and you might be able to uncover things there, concepts there that are not common to Western math. So it's not always an indigenous group, but also other cultural groups. And then, similar to what Nichnik is doing here, comparing cultural knowledge and academic knowledge, I also developed this idea of mutual interrogation, which I look at as a critical dialogue between two knowledge systems. The idea is to see how one knowledge can inform the other and vice versa. So it's not the usual encounter of knowledge systems where one is more dominant than the other. But we are looking at it from a perspective that these knowledge systems have important contributions to both knowledge systems, okay, giving value to the contribution of each knowledge system. So I call it mutual interrogation. You interrogate this academic knowledge interrogate this cultural knowledge, and we see how we can improve on it, improve that kind of relationship by looking at both the contributions of these knowledge systems. So now I go to, so with mutual interrogation, as a general methodological stance, we have some questions. When you want to do a study, you might want to start with some of the simple questions. I saw this in Borobudur the other day, and I can see the fives here. I think this one is 5, 5, 5, and all the other nuts as well in this in that museum has parang it's like it's base 5 that they're using. But anyway, what are the questions that you want to ask when you're doing a study? Where to look? No, where do I start my ethnomath study? And once I've decided, how do I what am I looking for? And then once you have found once you have decided how to look, what have you found? What is it? What is it that I found using this method, and what does it mean? It's a generic. These are generic questions that you can also use in other research endeavors. Okay, but let's look at each one. Where to look? Normally, you want to look at highly developed and established cultural practice or technologies in a cultural context. You're not looking for mathematics, but you're looking at how people think quantitatively, relationally, spatially in their practice, okay, in their cultural milieu. Because again, mathematics is a Western category. When they're doing the practice, they're not thinking about mathematics, but it's one way of expressing how they think quantitatively, or how they look at the space around them, how they relate the relationship of objects that they're using. So these QRS ideas are again due to Barton. Okay, so you're looking for QRS ideas that are embedded in the practice. So where do we look? In the language, in myths and stories. So again, when Lucy was touring me around Borobudur, the stories around, no? You might want to go back to the stories that are in the relief, because there might be ideas there that you missed when they're just talking about these stories. There might be ideas there that will give you some hints about how your ancestors thought about how they thought of space back then, of quantities, of relations. Are there written stories, accounts of what's in the around Borobudur? Yes, and these are well documented, right? So you might want to go back to those documents, to those stories, and see if you can find something there that you can use in your ethnomathematical study. Highly systematized practice or knowledge systems. Again, this reminds me of our stonewalling practice. No cement, no whatever, but they hold, they last, they work. It works. That practice works. How did they build this? What kind of ideas or concepts were put into place when they were building this? Are there documents to tell us that? Or can you do a more recent investigation on why this works? And maybe in all the adult if there's a concept that you can find here, see if that concept appears in other applications, no, in other temples or in other activities. Because if that appears, then that means that concept is prevalent. That's something useful. That's common to the culture during that time. So don't be content by looking at a concept that's just found here. If you find one, that's good, but see if this concept is also reflected in other activities. Because if it's reflected in other activities, that means that's very important. Okay? 5 minutes more. For 45 minutes, right? Okay. I'm almost done, I think. In navigation, again, I saw this in Borobudur, in the museum. We have a rich tradition of navigation. In the past, our ancestors traveled all over these islands. How did they manage that without the technology that we have now? What guided them? Right? There might be concepts there that will tell us on how they thought about space, perspectives, okay? What are the variables that they considered when they were traveling? And a good reading material is by Will Keselka, An Ocean in Mind. What he did was he traveled. He taught himself how to navigate using the old Polynesian way of navigating. Okay, so it gives us an idea of the ideas or the concepts that are involved in navigation during the time of the first navigators. Okay. So the first two questions were done. Yeah, we've done that. We've covered that. So the last two, what it is. When we have found something, what does it mean? What it is? No. So it could be an alternative conception, something that's not familiar to us, or it could be a different way of thinking mathematically. So sometimes it entails, it requires for us to identify what are the criteria for us to say that a concept is mathematics or mathematical. So that's something that we need to think about. But if you cannot do that, then describe the practice within the social milieu. Because concepts are connected to, have contexts. And you need to, knowledge systems have context. So we need to explain the context of that knowledge system. And of course, what it means, what is the importance of that to mathematics and to culture. And that gives us an idea of the relationship between these two forms of knowledge. What does cultural milieu mean? So for example, this research by, again, Brazilian ethnomathematicians, they look at some craftswomen in Brazil. So they're not really interested in identifying the math in the crafts, but the context of the craft. What are the issues faced by the craftswomen? Has the practice changed through the years? What are the issues involved in the production of this craft? So, and take note that we make use of ethnography. More often than not, when you're doing an ethnomath study, because you're looking at the interplay between culture and mathematics, ethnography is a useful methodology. So sometimes you need to go to the community, live with the community, try to understand how they think about certain things. Okay? So these are the, yeah, so these are the kuiyas that are done by those Brazilian craftswomen. So an old lady using a compass to create those patterns. So basically the discussion of the paper is, how have the patterns changed through the years? What caused the change? What are the patterns that they now develop? What are the problems that they encounter? So it's more describing the social milieu of the practice, not really the mathematics behind. Okay. So there are possibilities of research. Cultural plurality, therefore, and diversity are fertile grounds for us to do ethnomath research. No? If you're culturally diverse, you're lucky. And if you're doing ethnomath studies in a culturally diverse community, you are lucky because you have many things to work on. So where do we look for this? Languages, practices, Okay, those that might reveal alternative and new conceptions about QRS. So, one example. In my language, indigenous language, we don't have a word for circle. Unlike in mathematics, Western idea, circle is defined by using a point, right, in the middle, and you have the radius. In our indigenous language, we talk about encircling, but we don't have a word for circle, that object. So there's a point going around. So encircling, no circle. So if you define a circle using that point around the edge, not in the middle, what kind of objects do we get? It reminds me of Euclidean geometry, when mathematicians tried to prove that the fifth postulate is not independent of the rest. They were able to invent non-Euclidean geometries. So if you start questioning or if you start thinking about new things, it might lead you to new ideas. That symbol in Spanish reads, siete es mayor que cuatro, or 7 is greater than 4. But in the Amazonian language, Shipibo Konibo, this means 7 Riki 4 Bebon Ika, which gives a different meaning to what you have here. It says 7 is in front of 4. It doesn't talk about the value, 7 is greater than 4, but it talks about the position, a relation in space. 7 is in front of 4. Okay? Imagine a country with more than 2,000 languages. Does that sound familiar to you? The possibilities that you can have in studying these languages and the concepts that are embedded in these languages. And that's why it's important to revitalize our languages. Because if we lose a language, we lose so many concepts there. Right? And it's important in ethnomathematics. That's why ethnomathematics has also a role to play in the revitalization of our languages, indigenous languages. Because we're saying that there might be concepts in these languages that may be different from what we know or from Western conceptions. Okay? So you can start working on your several languages when you go back home and start looking at them. So basically what we're doing here in ethnomath is we're trying to bridge cultures. We're not saying that Western math is bad, no? It has brought us so many things. It has brought us to the moon. But then it's time for our own knowledge systems to reassert their importance. And for Western mathematics to recognize that importance and our contribution in the building of knowledge. I'd like to end by quoting Paulo Freire, one of the most important educational thinkers in the 20th century. The future isn't something hidden in a corner. It is something that we are building in the present. So what we're doing now is that we are building the future. As ethnomathematicians, we are building connections, bridging cultures. But I think it's also appropriate to end with the father of ethnomathematics. His vision, when he talked about ethnomathematics, and I'm sure we share this vision, is for us to have a just and humane society. So I think I will end there, and I hope I gave you some ideas on your future endeavors. Terima kasih.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Alangui, for the fruitful presentation. And the presentation is open our mind on how to do research on ethnomathematics. He already gave us so many vantage points, yeah, so many motivation from where we can do ethnomathematics research. Okay, we have time to question and answer. I think 10 minutes for question and answer. I give three of you to ask question. One, another one, two, once more. Oke, silakan. Dalam bahasa Inggris kalau bisa ya Bu, biar saya nggak usah translate. Please introduce yourself, your name and your institution.
Thank you very much. Let me introduce myself. My name is Sri Lestari. I come from SMU1 Magelang, Central Java. Thank you very much, sir. My first question is, as we all know that Indonesia has a rigid curriculum, and I teach in senior high school. And from your opinion, maybe could you give us the most suitable methods how to start, how to build the students' creativity to our student in 12th grades of senior high school using ethnomathematic ideas due to in the fact they not only study about mathematics, they have so many lessons to study because our students only have a short period of time, and they also need to prepare for the examination. And they also, not only national examination, and they also prepare to to join with the university. So it's very, very hard for us to prepare our students to build their creativities, to love mathematics, not only study about the abstract things. That is my first question, and this is my second question. Maybe this question is come from our friends here. From your example, as we know that ethnomathematics is come from our culture, and when I see the sample is all about the artifact, the batiks, and the other things with related with culture. How about the modern buildings? How about the minimalist concept of the house? Can we use that sample for our material? Maybe not every students interested with the old buildings. Maybe they have a new concept about a minimalist concept of housing. Maybe we can make it as our material to teach our student about ethnomathematics. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much Ibu Trio Lestari ya. Ya, oke, second question.
Good morning, Mister. My name is Laila Rofikoti Toyibah. I came from Blitar, East Java. I am a primary school teacher, so I want to ask you about a primary school teacher in Philippines. Okay, how the primary school teachers in Philippines tell about ethnomathematics to their children, and how the importance of ethnomathematics to their daily life, and is ethnomathematics is included in Philippines curriculum, so that the student can more motivate to study about ethnomathematics. Okay, thank you.
Thank you Ibu Laila dari Blitar. Next question, third question dari sebelah sana, Mbak.
Okay, thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And good morning, everyone. I'm Umi Salma. I'm from Simeo Kitab in Mathematics. I have a questions for the professor. My question is, I want to start with the Philippines and Indonesia as a diverse country. We have Philippines and Indonesia, as well as Indonesia. Philippines also a rich country. You have a very rich of culture, very plural and diverse. And my question is because culture is very interesting, especially in integrating in mathematics classroom. Is there any examples of the integrations of mathematics, the integration of the culture in the Philippines in mathematics classroom? I mean, if you have like an integration, the examples, could you share with us so all the teachers here can be motivated to put or to integrate the cultures in our mathematics classroom? And also similar with the questions of the second participants, where if you have integrated the culture in your mathematics classroom in the Philippines, is there any supports or maybe aspects in your curriculum that really supports the integrations of culture in mathematics classroom? Thank you.
Okay, thank you Ibu Salma dari Seyakim. Okay, Prof Wilfredo, Prof Alangui, you got all the question already? Okay, this time is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for the questions, very difficult ones. I hope I get them right. So for the first one, the rigidity of the curriculum and how do we encourage our students to be more creative. I think the first challenge really is because we are talking about how to do ethnomath studies in this session. It's really directed to the teachers how to pursue ethnomath studies and researches so that this can inform your teaching. But because that's one of the purposes or objectives of doing research. You can bring what you learned into the classroom. So the challenge, therefore, is if you are able to do research that you think might be useful to bring into the classroom so that your students can get excited and and be creative, then that's a good thing, So the challenge really is for you to do research, so that the outcome of this research you can bring into the classroom, and hopefully you get to excite your students to be more creative as well. I know the difficulty of following that very rigid curriculum, and that's the reason why, as Dr. Marsigit said earlier, there has to be institutional support. There has to be a change in paradigm. If you are being encouraged to go into ethnomathematics, then this has to be reflected also in terms of policy, or in terms of institutional support. And there has to be openness and willingness to somehow loosen the curriculum a bit so that you're allowed to experiment and be creative in all these aspects of your teaching. So that even the students don't have to cram everything in, rush to study all abstract concepts, and forgetting about the idea that we're doing this for you to learn mathematics better by asking you to think critically and creatively. So first, do research. See if you can use it in the classroom to make your students creative as well. Encourage your students to be creative. But then the organization, perhaps the association, Ethnomath Association, and even P4TK can start lobbying, for more institutional support. Okay, so I hope that response to your concern about that making your students be more creative and that problem about the rigidity of the curriculum. What about ideas coming from modern applications? That certainly is something that you can do. No, when D'Ambrosio thought about or proposed ethnomathematics, he was thinking about Western knowledge system being so dominant, other ideas that are subjugated. So that encounter between these knowledge systems. So if you have, but now that's evolving. That's evolving, and certainly you can study practices of architects, nurses, no, and other practitioners, and see if there's something there that might give you a way of thinking mathematically that's different from what is taught in the classroom. And that's also important to highlight. Because in other words, the way we're teaching things in the classroom may not always be applicable, especially when you already go to the actual grind, no? Daily grind. Like you become an architect, you become a nurse, and then suddenly you develop new ways of thinking mathematically, thinking, which is different from what you learned in the classroom. So modern buildings, for example, new ideas there. Certainly, that's something that you can explore. Okay, just remember that we are looking at new ideas. We are not just privileging Western mathematics. Okay, but we are also looking at contribution of other societies and other cultural groups. Okay, for Laila's question regarding primary school teachers, how do they use ethnomathematics in daily life? Is it included in the Philippine curriculum? Only recently did our government, under the former President Aquino, in 2011, did they come up with an institutional policy. The Department of Education came up with the Indigenous Peoples Education Program policy, which mandates all our institutions, the Department of Education, to encourage our schools to integrate IP education in the curriculum. So, since then, we have developed our curriculum framework. But for each region, you have a different framework because, again, cultures are different. You cannot have one curriculum framework in my region and apply it to Mindanao. Okay, so there's a general policy for a curriculum framework, but then the divisions, the teachers are free to localize and to make it relevant to their setting. The teachers are still in the process of developing their lessons, not only in mathematics, because the order is for everything, all subjects, to make it culturally relevant, even in science, in language courses, everything. So not only in mathematics. So we're still developing, and the teachers are having a hard time. It's not a difficult endeavor. So I'm sure if you start doing it, it will not be easy. But the important thing is for you to sustain that interest and talk to your colleagues, talk to other people, and get support from each other. Because it's not easy to develop a culturally sustaining or responsive mathematics curriculum. So there are attempts now. There are some examples already, or exemplars, but we are still in the process of testing this, building this momentum that we have started already. But I need to tell you about some efforts in the country outside of the government. Because before 2011, we already have a lot of schools, some of them private, that are already doing, that are already making their curriculum culturally relevant. So a community that I work with in the middle of the country, they've been doing it since 1995. And they have already developed some materials that are culturally sensitive, even in mathematics. So for example, when I first went to that community, to that school, one of the indigenous teachers who did not have a who's not a certified teacher, but an indigenous, and she belongs to that community, she was teaching fractions to students. And these students come from different tribes, no? In the community. But the lesson on fractions started by talking about harvesting honey. So she asks the students, how do you harvest honey in your tribe? What are the materials that you use? What are the guidelines that our elders tell us when we harvest honey? So all these students coming from different groups talked about their practice, talked about the materials, talked about the values that are inherent in harvesting honey. And one common value is that when you harvest, depending on the number of people who help harvest, you need to share equally your harvest. Why? Why is that important? Because the elders said that if you don't share equally, if one is greedy, then there will be disunity. There will be chaos in our community. So that is common to all of them. So that's something that they develop. And then after that discussion about the value of harvesting and sharing equally, that's when they go to fractions. And they relate how that practice is related to the idea of fractions. And then you have a usual lesson about fractions. And then after that discussion about fractions, during the end of the lecture, the teacher asks, so again, what did we learn? What do we know about harvesting honey? And why is it important for us to share equally? And the value is reinforced. So that's just one aspect of a lesson in math that is informed by cultural values or cultural practice. And they have more. So that's one thing that you can also do. So that also responds to the third question, because that's an example that I can easily think about at the moment. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you Prof. Alangui. Bisa diterima jawabannya semua? Bu Trio, Bu Laila, dan from the historical. Sesi ini kepada Ibu Mima sebagai MC. Thank you, terima kasih banyak.
Thank you very much, Ibu Titik Sutanti, for having led our session this today. And please give big applause for Professor Wilfredo V. Alangui for enlightening us on ethnomathematics. Ladies and gentlemen, after this, we will have a break, and then we will go to cultural sites according to your own location. And we have some explanations, we have some details about our study in cultural sites. Baik. Sedikit pengumuman bagi Bapak Ibu yang nantinya akan pergi ke keraton, nantinya Bapak Ibu makan siangnya di armada yang telah disediakan, sedangkan bagi Bapak Ibu yang ke Prambanan, Boko, dan Kota Gede, makan siangnya nanti adalah tetap di hotel. Baik, sebelum ke penjelasan dari P4TK Matematika akan menyerahkan souvenir kepada Profesor Wilfredo. We kindly invite the head of division for program and information of PM4TK Matematika to present souvenir to Professor Wilfredo V. Alangui. The souvenir is Punto Dewa puppet. He is the oldest among Pandawa Lima. Baik Bapak Ibu, kita lanjutkan dengan sedikit penjelasan teknis mengenai studi etnomatematika di situs budaya pada siang hari ini. Pada siang hari ini kita akan mengunjungi situs budaya sesuai dengan lokasi masing-masing. Ada di Keraton Yogyakarta untuk schedule-nya. Yang ke Keraton Yogyakarta, jadi sekarang adalah jam 12. Jadi jam 12 mulai dari selesainya pengumuman ini nanti silahkan Bapak Ibu yang akan mengunjungi Keraton Yogyakarta diberikan waktu 15 menit untuk berganti kaos. Kemudian bagi ibu-ibu sekalian membawa mukena, kemudian turun untuk naik ke armada high ace. Disediakan 4 high ace yang sudah siap di bawah. Adapun untuk makan siang dan coffee breaks-nya disajikan dalam bentuk box, sudah tersedia di dalam high ace. Kemudian jam 12 sampai 12.30 kita perjalanan ke keraton, mudah-mudahan waktunya cukup karena untuk Keraton Yogyakarta ini jam 2 sudah tutup. Jadi kita kemarin sudah sudah mengatur agar kita bisa jam 2 itu sudah selesai. Kemudian jam 14.17 kita ke Malioboro, jangan lupa bawa sedikit bekal, uang saku. Kemudian jam 17 sampai 17.30 kita pergi ke hotel lagi. Selanjutnya, our next site is Kota Gede. So, for those of you who will study ethnomathematics in Kota Gede in HS Silver Craft Center, semuanya akan makan siang di hotel ini untuk yang di Kota Gede. Kemudian sholat sampai jam 12.30 sampai jam 1 perjalanan ke Kota Gede, 13 sampai 17 studi etno, 17 sampai 17.30 kembali ke hotel. Kemudian yang ketiga Prambanan, yang ke Prambanan juga makan siang di sini. Kemudian setengah 1 berangkat ke lokasi sampai jam 17 studi etno dan jam 17 sampai 17.30 perjalanan ke hotel kembali. Selanjutnya Candi Ratu Boko, makan siang di sini, kemudian perjalanan ke lokasi sampai jam 1 dan jam 1 sampai jam 5. Mudah-mudahan dapat sunsetnya ya. Terus jam 1 sampai jam 5 studi etno di Candi Ratu Boko. Kemudian jam 5 sampai 5.30 perjalanan kembali ke hotel. Baik Bapak Ibu, demikianlah pengumuman untuk siang hari ini dan mohon Bapak Ibu untuk bergerak agak cepat ya. Jadi agar nanti perjalanan kita tidak terlalu lama di dalam persiapannya. Baik Bapak Ibu, terima kasih. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.